I'm very excited to welcome you to our first event in our series on unpacking the root causes of casework. So what we've talked about this series is kind of a chance for caseworkers to step back for a moment away from the day-to-day realities of handling casework, the ins and outs and the frontline work, and kind of make space to talk about why casework happens. Why do the issues that we see from constituents show up? Why are they so difficult to fix? And how can casework expertise really translate into fixing policy? And this is such a wonderful start to this series with a case study of the tools with PolicyEngine that really get at the heart of what makes casework special. That connection between granular constituent experience and the large-scale policy and making those connections clear and usable for everybody. So Max, thank you so much for joining us. For everyone else, Max is the co-founder and CEO of PolicyEngine, previously founded the UBI Center, which is a think tank researching universal basic income policies, worked as a data scientist at Google. Max earned his degrees in operations research and management science from UC Berkeley and master's degree in data economics and development policy from MIT. So Max is here to talk about PolicyEngine, which develops open source tools that empower anyone to input details about a household and subsequently estimate their taxes and benefits. So this provides a clear understanding of the intricate ways in which the various programs intersect, which, as caseworkers know very well, can be one of the trickiest parts of casework. So today, Max is going to share a bit about PolicyEngine, the journey behind it, and the complexity of figuring out and coding program rules, and how the benefit side and the big picture policy econ side fit together, or how they should fit together. Max, thank you again for joining us. Over to you.
Great. Thank you, Anne, and good to meet you all. Thanks for the chance to share a bit about PolicyEngine. And I'm really excited to get your feedback on how we can build software that better meets the needs of your constituents and your day-to-day work. Just as a bit of background on myself, and then I have a couple slides, and then I'll go through a demo. As Anne mentioned, I started my career in tech. I was a data scientist at Google for a number of years and decided to get into economic policy for a couple of reasons. One, I was really interested in the impact of poverty, just looking at more of the research suggesting that poverty causes a lot of other downstream problems for people experiencing it. And two, it was a bit closer at home. So my brother has a spinal cord injury. And when he was entering the labor force, he was really interested in understanding how benefits would be affected by different employment situations and how much he worked, how much he earned. And it was quite a challenge to figure this out. And I think you've all seen this more than we have, but my brother has a master's degree in public policy from UC Berkeley. I have done data science work for a while, and still it took just an enormous amount of effort to figure out how all the programs fit together and ultimately whether it would be worthwhile for him to take jobs that would result in him losing benefits that really helped him get in and out of bed every day. So between those two, I decided to go back to school for economics and saw similar kind of gaps in terms of technology, people using spreadsheets or basic tools that could be more powerful to do research on how to improve and understand the impact of these programs at a more macro level. So I started the UBI Center to research ways to do this through certain policy reforms around cash transfers. And then we built PolicyEngine really to help us do our modeling and communicate the results. And by the time we launched it, which was about 2 years ago, we realized that there was a bigger opportunity in sort of going fully into this policy simulation world, both at the household and macro level. So that was about 2 years ago. We started in the UK, and about 18 months ago, we moved into the US. And that's really where the bulk of our work is today. So given our history in the benefit space, very excited to share with you how we're approaching this. So I will move to my slides now, but I do have the Zoom up on my monitor, so feel free to drop questions. Okay, so I thought I'd start with just what is PolicyEngine, talk a bit more conceptually about how tax and benefit programs interact, and then move to the demo where I'll go through how this all works for a single parent of a disabled child in California, as an example. So both under their current situation and also if they were to change their earnings, where their cliffs are. And then want to give you a peek into policy reform modeling as well. think is not the core of casework today, but I hope it can be useful for your colleagues in the policy world, and also sort of anticipating the impact of policy reforms on your casework itself, and opportunities to really improve the system for based on the work that you do. And then I'll talk about where we're headed, and want to leave as much time as possible for your questions at the end. Okay, so PolicyEngine is, we're a nonprofit, and we have the mission to compute the impact of public policy for everyone. So we build free open source software that anyone can use to really see how policy, especially tax and benefit policy, affects them at the individual level and macro level. Anyone can use this for free. And also by everyone, we really do have international scope, as well as within US states and federally. So organizations worldwide use PolicyEngine both for policy reform analysis and also to help their communities understand how tax and benefit programs work. So both in the UK and the US, a number of nonprofits, think tanks, sort of the UN has certified us as a digital public good. And we're also starting to work with other countries, including Canada, Israel, and we really do try to work on both sides of the aisle. Example, in the UK, the Green Party uses us, as well as the Center for Policy Studies, which is the most prominent conservative think tank. And a few things you can do, and we'll go through this in more detail in a minute, but if you're a household, you can use PolicyEngine to compute your household taxes and benefits. So just enter a few pieces of information about yourself, and we will use our rules engine to help you understand that. If you're more on the policy reform side, you can design a custom policy reform. So we have thousands of different policy parameters you can adjust to make the policy reform that really reflects the policy you're trying to create. And once you do that, you can see how that reform is going to affect an individual. So that same household we looked at before, and also society at large. For example, how much it might cost or raise, and how that might affect poverty, inequality, and other distributional impacts. So this might seem like kind of a wide range of disconnected outcomes and results, but really at the core of it is an open source tax benefit rules engine that captures really at the individual level under current law, individual level under a reform, and then once you can do it for an individual, you can do it for tens of thousands of households, which lets you estimate the impact on society at large. Okay, so that's roughly what we do at PolicyEngine, and want to give also a high-level view of why tax and benefit programs interact and in which ways. There's really three ways that we think about how these programs interact. One is called categorical eligibility. So if you are eligible for one program, you might be eligible automatically for another. Some benefits treat other benefits as sources of income, and therefore they would reduce the value of another benefit if it's means tested. And also, aside from just the pure benefit side, there are interactions on the tax side too. So just a little deeper on each of these, categorical eligibility is where if you receive one benefit, you will automatically be eligible for another. So one instance of this is TANF. If you're eligible for TANF, you're eligible for SNAP automatically. And this is both true of the cash benefits, and also non-cash benefits like brochures are actually, there's a special term for that, which you may be familiar with, broad-based categorical eligibility. And this is the mechanism by which states can remove certain federal restrictions on SNAP, for example, asset limits. You create a TANF benefit that's just a brochure and don't have an asset limit on that program, but because they're getting the brochure, they're eligible for SNAP, regardless of the federal asset limit, those kinds of things. So that's one example. If you're eligible for SSI, you also are eligible for SNAP. And it just sort of keeps going. So if you're eligible for SNAP, you're eligible for school meals. And you can keep mapping this all out. This is a subset of programs that you could put into this web. So SNAP, school meals, affordable connectivity program is made eligible via school meals, also via Lifeline and WIC. SNAP entitles you to WIC, and so on. So it's quite a complicated web that really having a model can aid with. Another mechanism by which these programs interact is if one program counts as income for another program. So for instance, SSI not only makes you eligible for SNAP, but the benefits you receive from SSI are counted as income for SNAP. So it sort of makes you immediately eligible for, but also reduces your benefit amount because of the higher income you have. Similarly, SSI, these sort of red lines indicate the income counting. So SSI counts as income for TANF. TANF counts as income for SNAP. And then I tried to do this with the taxes, but it ended up being easier to just sort of write it out. There are interactions between the tax side and benefit side in that many governments tax benefits as income, but it's not always consistent, especially across states. So just a few ways in which this happens. The US does tax unemployment benefits, and it taxes a fraction of social security benefits. States vary in how they tax these benefits as well. So as one example, DC excludes both social security and unemployment benefits from taxable income. Hawaii only excludes social security, so it does still tax unemployment benefits, and Arizona counts both as taxable income. There are some other ways too. So some states provide tax credits that are based on a broader income concept that, unlike federal taxes or even state taxes usually, would count programs like SSI and TANF. So for example, Missouri has a property tax credit, and this counts SSI, TANF, and child support as income, in addition to more normal income sources like wages and salaries. And then some states have even more complex programs where it's not as obvious how the benefits factor in. But for example, Idaho has a grocery tax credit. And in designing that, they've excluded SNAP participants because the idea is to cover the sales taxes from groceries, and SNAP is exempt from sales tax. So sort of they count the number of months that you were on SNAP and then prorate the grocery tax credit based on those number of months. So all of this is to say there's a lot of ways in which these interact, and just having a list of those interactions doesn't quite get you the full picture. Sometimes having graphics can help, but we believe really having a comprehensive model that actually does the computations is the most effective way to guide people. So with that, I will move to the demo. And again, what we're going to look at here is just a single parent of a disabled child in California. So this person, their household will be eligible for a variety of benefit programs, SSI, WIC, TANF potentially, as well as SNAP. And some of these are going to interact in ways we will be able to observe. So you can follow along at PolicyEngine.org. And here there are really two entry points to the PolicyEngine software. So we have one that's household oriented, where you can compute your taxes and benefits. And the second is where you can design a policy reform. I'm going to start here. At the end, I'll just give a peek into the policy reform side as well. Okay, so this takes you to a basic form. We ask 5 questions to get you started and also give the opportunity to give more detail later on. So enter my household. We're going to say we're a single parent with 1 dependent. And I'm going to select California. And just so they're going to be eligible for a lot of benefits, I'm going to set their income to a pretty low dollar figure, $8,000. I'm also going to lower the age of their dependent to 3. This will entitle them to WIC. Okay, so we've now done the computation, and this is sort of the single most important number that we think we show. This is your net income after taxes and benefits. So the household earns $8,000 from market sources. They receive about $12,000 from benefits, another $6,000 from refundable tax credits, and they do pay some tax. And we can expand this to see in more detail what benefit programs they're eligible for. So they get SNAP, WIC, and TANF in this case. Click it again to collapse. And now the refundable tax credits, we will see the federal side and the state side. So federal, they get EITC and CTC, or the refundable part of CTC. California also has similar types of programs, and they're eligible for 2 of those. And I'll just add while I'm here, and then payroll tax. The reason we do taxes and benefits, and I think we might talk about this a bit later in terms of how to simplify benefit policy, is these refundable tax credits have really started to blur the line between taxes and benefits. So they're effectively benefits paid through the tax code. And as such, in some cases here in DC, they're thinking of providing these on a monthly basis too. So they become even more like benefits. And when we start to look at things like marginal tax rates and how benefits factor into taxes, we found it very helpful to see both. Okay. By the way, for folks just joining, feel free to, I'll actually drop the slides in once more. Feel free to chime in with any questions at any time.
Guys, can I actually jump in with a question?
Yeah.
So I know that you said, we use California as the example here. Is this ready to go for every state? I know it's a pain getting all of these individual benefits programs in.
Yes. In general, yes. So we do federal taxes, SNAP, Affordable Connectivity Program, those kind of programs nationwide. Some that are more bespoke by state include TANF, and we only have a few TANF states done. Also, the state income tax model, we have 27 states done, but we will complete the remaining states by the end of the year. And that will include state tax credits. Some programs we haven't really started on, and I'll talk about this at the end as well, are like childcare subsidies vary significantly by state. But we're not showing it here, but we do compute Medicaid and ACA subsidies, and we're looking to be able to display that in the app sometime soon.
Amazing. Thank you.
So one other thing we can do here is look at how the programs interact visually, and in particular, how they vary with your earnings. So this is a chart that shows as you earn more, how much does your net income after taxes and benefits change? So we can actually zoom in here, and this dot indicates where they are today. So $8,000, they have that $25,000 net income. And that's about to fall because there's a cliff from TANF. So if they earn above 9,500, they no longer become eligible for TANF. And this gray area is sort of, we informally call this the earnings dead zone, where if they earn between 9,500 and 16,500, they're going to be worse off as a result of this cliff. Similarly, there's a SNAP cliff here. And the reason you can see this, we don't sort of tell the user by default, but we can actually go in and look at specific programs, for example, SNAP allotment. So you can see after that 27.5, they are going to lose their entire SNAP benefit. And you might wonder, okay, what's up with this negative cliff here? And it turns out it's because TANF influences your SNAP income. So when you lose the TANF, when you hit the cliff from TANF, part of that is offset by a negative cliff from SNAP. And we can see that that cliff is indeed TANF by looking at TANF itself. So TANF, I think this is higher up. Oops, all works. Where was this? TANF amount. Okay, I think this is it. Oh, where's it? TANF eligible. I was just looking at this. Oh, here it is. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so now we can see, okay, that's the cliff at 9,500, falls down at 10,000. I just want to go back to the SNAP real quick because we're about to So far, we haven't given the child a disability, which is part of what we're looking to do. So just want to make a mental note of the fact that the cliff here for SNAP is at 27,500 because this is going to move once they are eligible for SSI. Okay, so to give them a disability, we can search for any variable in our system. So we have hundreds of variables, including childcare expenses, rent expenses, and also the simplest way to make them eligible for SSI is to say that they are blind. So the first dependent is going to be blind. And now we can go back to net income. And we see that their net income has increased. It was about 25,000. Now it's about 27. And that's because they're now getting SSI. So about $11,000 from SSI over the year. And they're no longer getting TANF. So SSI, because it's counted as income for TANF, it makes them exceed the income limit for TANF in California. And we can see this as well if we go back here. So we can start by looking at TANF. If I can figure that one out again. Okay, there it is. Yeah. So it's going to be 0 regardless. So the SSI benefit, even at 0 earnings, is going to put them above the income limit for TANF. We can also look at SSI. So SSI is going to be up here. And you can sort of see that at this income range, they're still within the bounds before it starts phasing out. So as long as they earn below about $22,000, they're going to get the maximum SSI benefit. And then it starts phasing out. SSI phases out 50 cents on the dollar. So by the time they earn 46,000, they are no longer eligible for SSI. And now if you'll recall that crazy graphic I showed before, SSI also entitles you to SNAP. So if we go now to the SNAP allotment, they are now going to be eligible for SNAP all the way up to that $45,000 mark. And then they have a cliff. So without SSI eligibility, this would they would become ineligible around 27,000. That's what we saw before. Now it's about 45,000. So all of these really interact. Very hard to mentally do the math in terms of where these cliffs and phase outs are going to be by itself, but we hope that by presenting it in this kind of format, it's going to be a lot easier for you and constituents ultimately to visualize that. Just before I move on to the reform side, I'll just add a couple other pieces because, for example, housing costs are going to affect this as well. So I'm just going to give them some housing costs, maybe $8,000 a year. I'm going to give them some childcare expenses, maybe $4,000 a year. And I'm also going to give them some broadband cost. So this will give them affordable connectivity program. So maybe just $50 a month or so. And now we're going to see that benefits have all changed a bit. So SNAP is going to go up as it has to do with how much you spend on rent. There's sort of a housing subsidy built into SNAP. And then Lifeline and Affordable Connectivity Program, they are now eligible for as well. Okay, before I move on, I'll just pause briefly in case anyone has any questions on this side of the product, and then I'll move on to the reform side. Okay, great. So this second piece is to really demonstrate the capabilities of PolicyEngine to visualize the impact and compute the impact of policy reforms. So I'm just going to go back here. And really what we're going to do is a pretty simple reform. We're just going to make the child tax credit fully refundable. This will not be the entire reform that happened in 2021 under ARPA. It's just going to make it fully refundable. And we'll see the impact of that now on the household as well as California. overall. And we can look at the US as well. So to do this, we go here on the right side, create a reform. And this is going to display all the policy parameters are in our model. So we have about several thousand of these, everything from tax rates, tax deductions, to state level tax credits, to the parameters that govern programs like SNAP and SSI. And if I want to make a change to the federal tax system, I go to IRS, credits, child tax credit, refundability, and fully refundable CTC. So I'm just going to toggle this on. You can sort of see this is a timeline of how this parameter looked historically. And most of these parameters are numeric, so you can see how they've changed as a result of legislation or inflation adjustments. In our case, we can just see that 2021, it was true, 2022 it's not, and now we're going to change the rules from 2023 over to 2028. Now I can go back to calculate my household impact, and it's going to recompute this household's taxes and benefits under this new policy regime. So you might remember that before we did this, I did look at the refundable CTC, and it was $825. So now their net income is going to rise by $1,175 to the full $2,000 refundable CTC. So their federal refundable credits are going to rise $1,175, and we can see that that is occurring at the refundable CTC portion. The other thing we can do is view how this changes depending on their earnings. So we're back to this net income chart, and now there's a few more lines here, a few more cliffs. We can see baseline and reform here. Really zoom in. You can see that the lines sort of differ. That's not the easiest way to see it. If you click difference, now you can see, okay, here's how the reform is going to affect this household depending on their earnings. So here at $8,000, they're getting that $1,175. If they have no earnings, then it's going to be the full $2,000 refundable CTC because they're currently ineligible for any refundable CTC, and the non-refundable doesn't benefit them because they don't owe taxes. Now there's a plateau, and then by the time that the reform fully phases out, it's really benefiting folks only if they earn below $33,000 if they are a single parent of one. Okay, and now I can go back to the reform. This button isn't perfectly named, but edit my reform, and we can see the impact on the US, that's a default, or any state. So if we go to California, calculate economic impact, budgetary impact. And I sort of ran this in advance, so that's why it was instant. Usually it takes about 20, 30 seconds, and it runs a model called a microsimulation model, pretty similar to the type of models that CBO and JCT apply. So we can really say, okay, this reform would cost $2.4 billion in California. That really means the California share of federal expenditures would be $2.4 billion. And the flip side of that is it brings in $2.4 billion to California residents. But we can break this down in a number of ways. I'm going to zoom out, touch. Here we go. So we see by income decile, folks in the bottom 4 income deciles have a larger benefit from the reform. And if you sort of see this as a percentage of their net income, it's consistently increasing the net income of lower income households more. Some other charts, like we estimate the percentage of residents that it would benefit. In this case, 1 in 8 California residents would gain from the reform. And then we have poverty impact. So this would lower child poverty by 15%, overall poverty 4%. And we break that down in a variety of other ways as well, including deep poverty, poverty by sex, race, and ethnicity, and various measures of income inequality. And then the last thing I'll show here is, since I know, Anne, you had a question about AI. We have this AI-powered analysis tool. So we can say, okay, instead of just showing all those charts, I can send that data to an AI model. In this case, we use OpenAI's GPT-4 model, which is behind ChatGPT, and ask it to describe what this policy reform is doing, both how the policy is designed and also what the computational impacts are going to be. So this takes a few seconds to get started. But we can also, if you are interested in this sort of AI stuff and have used ChatGPT, what we're doing is we're generating an AI prompt. And we start it by just giving some general instructions on how we want it to write the report. Then we provide all the data behind each of the charts that we want to describe. So here are various numbers that show up in the charts over here. Doesn't usually take that long, so I'm just going to close with some slides and see if it figures itself out by the time we conclude. Okay, so in terms of where we're headed, we're really working on three main parts of the app in the next year or so. So one is improving our policy models, improving our user experience, and also improving the value for the policy reform side of the product. On the policy model side, we're anticipating to complete the state income taxes by end of year. So we have federal income taxes, many federal benefits, including SNAP, including how they vary by state. But we only have about 27 state income taxes. So we're finishing up the remainder this year. We only have a handful of states for TANF today, so we'd like to complete those. Some other programs like childcare subsidies and Section 8, we would like to add. And then also figure out how we can validate against official records. We have a pretty comprehensive, yes, thanks, Elise. Actually, there was a small income tax in New Hampshire, and I think they recently got rid of even that small piece, but we do have that. And then, so we do have some machinery to validate the state income taxes against another model. There really isn't a source of truth for benefit program eligibility. So we'd like to figure out how we can work with state governments or other organizations to ensure the accuracy of those models. On the UX side, we are starting to redesign the calculator. We recently redesigned sort of the homepage, and we want to do that through UX research, especially with input from folks who are working on the benefit side, benefit navigation side. Most of our users today are on the policy reform kind of think tank user side, and we want to get a more holistic view into how folks can use the product. You sort of saw we have this basic 5-question questionnaire today, and then there's just a host of other programs or inputs that you can provide to get more detailed results. We'd like to make that sequence of questions a little bit smarter, especially you could imagine saying, okay, I'm really interested in my eligibility for this particular program, and we would figure out what questions to ask you based on that. In addition to what we do through the app directly, we serve an API. So we do have currently 2 organizations who are building their own benefit navigator tools. One is in Denver, Colorado, from the Gary Community Ventures team. They have a product called My Friend Ben. And instead of building all the benefit rules themselves, they're calling our API to do that automatically. And then there's another organization in Los Angeles that is starting to do that for government caseworkers in the county, and they're going to use our API as well. So we really be excited about expanding our reach further through more third-party partnerships like that. And then the same way that we currently have AI powering that policy report, we'd like to have a chatbot. This could be embedded into ChatGPT or something on our website, but we think these large language models really could expand access to people who might not otherwise be as interested in using the core UX of using a lot of dropdowns and entering things. And it would sort of automate that process of figuring out what questions we need to ask to deliver the best, most accurate results for the user. And then just on the reform side, this is using the microsimulation kind of work that CBO and JCT use. We're trying to replicate that to really bring that power to anyone for any reform that they're interested in. So right now, the main thing we're working on there is enhancing a data set that's used for those kinds of computations using machine learning. And we will launch that in Q1 of next year. We're also adding labor supply responses. So if someone faces higher marginal tax rates, they're expected to reduce their labor supply. And we will have that by Q2 of 2024. And the thing that we're really excited by, we don't have funding for it yet, but we're hoping that we can make that happen in time for the to really inform the election, is if you can design a policy reform and then view the impact, not just nationwide, not just by state, but also by congressional district. We'd also like to do state legislative district. We think that could just really empower constituents to understand the impact of policy reform, not just on their household and nationwide, but their own community. So that's sort of where we're going. And I will conclude the prepared piece of this here and really look forward to your questions. Thank you so much for the chance to share what we're doing.
Max, thank you so much. This is so cool. I'm just having such a nerd moment just watching you go through all the calculations. And I think it's for the caseworkers on the call too. This is so validating to see the amount of expertise that caseworkers develop over the course of their careers in one place, just looking at that web of benefits and how they intersect. And that's something that good caseworkers know really well. And it's really hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to find that stuff. It's not easy to understand how it intersects. So I think just incredibly validating, just see that visually is really, really cool. So thank you.
Great.
I don't want to hog the questions. So if anyone else has any questions, please, suggestions, thoughts, reactions, please jump in. But in the meantime, Max, I'm really curious. So it seems like what an incredible amount of work it's taken to get all of these benefits rules in one place. And I remember from a couple of cases that it's not always easy to find all of the details around certain benefits and the ways that they interact. I had a nightmare web case where I think the final detail I needed to verify someone's calculation wasn't public anywhere. Have you run into that with anything, with just the rules that you need not being accessible?
Yeah, I think it happens especially the lower you get in the geography. So nationwide, it's pretty good. You can just look at the US code. Not always, but a lot of the time the nationwide rules are there. In certain states, there's just a lot of variety in terms of how much data they provide and how easy it is to access the handbooks. I think, and then at the county level for this LA project, we've been looking at the rulebook or the website for general relief, the cash assistance program that they have. And it's just not available on their website at all. There is some email group that our partner found that you had to join, and they sort of sent the updated codebooks there. But I think this is, for us, part of the reason also that we want to have it paired with taxes, because taxes are always, it's not always super perfectly accessible, but there's just such a big gap from how much governments invest in transparency on the tax versus benefit side. So we hope that we can sort of make that comparison even more concrete to them and request that they adopt the same kind of practices on the benefit side.
Nice. And out of curiosity, I mean, this is such an incredible tool, and there are so few that work like this. And I know you mentioned kind of CBO and JCT do some of the bigger picture modeling. Whose job is it to figure out how these programs work together? Is there any like one entity, person, federal government, state government, who's supposed to be doing this, or is it just you guys jumping into the gap?
I don't think there is a government agency that's doing this too much. The part of it is because, as you saw, we present the policy reform side with respect to each of the agencies. We break down the policy parameters from IRS, HUD, HHS, the FCC, et cetera. So there are just so many different departments that manage these that there isn't necessarily the motivation. I think nonprofits and other organizations are getting into this space as well. So the Atlanta Federal Reserve branch has built something called the Policy Rules Database. And they do have some, we sort of complement each other nicely, I think. We have more complete state income tax policies. They have some more complete benefit programs. They have more TANF and CCDF rules. I think they've been using that because they have a research motivation. And that research motivation really was driven by the cliff question. Because if you look at CBO, JCT, they're primarily interested in scoring the effects of policy reforms on the federal tax side, or maybe federal benefit side. But this idea of people should not be punished for taking a raise or for working additional hours is not exactly in their purview, but it is becoming a bigger topic in the nonprofit and sort of other research spaces. So there's a couple others. There's also a benefitcliffs.org organization that's run by a group out of Georgia. I think it's just a couple states that they have right now. But yeah, we're excited that there is a growing community that is starting to work on it. And we hope we can push it forward with some more open source and better interfaces as well.
Definitely. So it sounds like there's significant room for, I don't know, a select committee on the intersection of
Yes.
federal benefits or something, joint select committee for folks who need suggestions for their legislative team this week. How can we write legislation and regulations to make this easier? Is there, I know you're not a legislator, but just if you had suggestions, if you had this imaginary joint select committee on the intersection of benefits in front of you, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I think the validation is a big question. So all the folks who are working on this, partially because the laws and rules are hard to find, they're ambiguous sometimes, and there is discretion in some cases, even in terms of how caseworkers, the ones who are actually making the calls, interpret those rules. So what we've been hoping for is that there could be some county or state government that's going to step in and just give a corpus of real or synthetic kind of fake cases and say, this is how we would do it in this case. Because then we're establishing a source of truth that anyone who's trying to model the programs, including the interactions, can test against. Mm-hmm. Aside from that, I think you could imagine some sort of rule that requires more accessible rule books, like whatever website promotes the program should just have the rule book linked right on that website. You shouldn't have to go in. I'm not sure if the federal government can sort of mandate that from states, but maybe there can be some sort of grant program that encourages that transparency. And I think the third would be just measuring the actual experience of folks. I know you're having Don Moynihan on next week, which is awesome. And his team is starting to measure the administrative burdens of these programs. But I think we could expand that, accelerate it much more so that we have some sort of baseline where we're making improvements via tools like ours or just enhancements to the availability of those rules. And there you could, we could see the impact of those kinds of reforms and really just get a better sense of what Annie Lowry has wrote about so much, the time tax. We just don't really know how severe it is yet.
Yeah, and I think this makes kind of the emotional, just again, with the charts from PolicyEngine, just makes the mental emotional planning and decision-making burden so clear, which is really, really cool.
Thank you.
Again, hog the room. Oh, go for it, Max.
Oh, I saw a couple questions in the chat.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I know Stephen asked if this is live, and yes, I think the answer is yes, it is. Mm-hmm. Anybody can use it. That's
right. Yeah. Yeah, so you just go to policyengine.org and it will, it's free and open source for anyone to use.
And caseworkers on the call, I'd love to hear how you think your constituents would use this, how you would use this in interactions with constituents. So again, please don't let me hog the floor here. If you have thoughts and suggestions, feel free to jump on in.
Yeah, can you hear me, Anne?
Yes, we got you, Elise.
Oh, hi. Thank you for this. I'm sorry that I hopped on a little bit late. I'm going to try and catch up later by watching it and looking at the slideshow in its entirety. Um, but this makes me think that going forward, we'll have something that can provide us with the definitive information that we probably don't have any other means to obtain. And so using a Social Security case as an example, we get a lot of Social Security cases where we have an individual coming to us saying, what Social Security has done here, what they're telling me, the numbers, this is wrong. Social Security is wrong. If we conduct our inquiry with Social Security does a review, they come back and they say, no, we're not wrong. Thank you. Have a good day. But for us to, do a deeper dive and take a look at these numbers and take a look at the information that we've been provided from the constituent, oftentimes it does look like there's an error on the part of Social Security. And again, this is just one example. And at that point, if we've already done our inquiry and Social Security has told us, this is the answer, and it can be a challenge to then go back with any kind of rebuttal to that agency and say, we don't actually think you're correct here. So to have a place to maybe direct the constituent or even to go ourselves and put in information that we have to then get back, again, the definitive answer that we're looking for and have that as, you know, additional information that we can then present to the agency, kind of fighting back. That's really, really, really helpful. And I know for us, we get a lot of crossover federal benefit and state level benefit cases that just bleed together. And you have to, we as caseworkers have to try and educate ourselves very thoroughly on each one of these individual benefit matters. And when it becomes 3, 4, 5 of them that are all intersecting and overlapping, that's very, very time consuming. And when we try to do it to the best of our ability, we are limited in our time, especially when we have high volume of incoming. So I'm really excited to check this out, and I'm really excited for the information and the support that this will provide to those types of cases. So thank you.
Thank you, Elise. Yeah. No, that's really great to hear. Unfortunately, we don't do Social Security modeling right now where you could sort of enter your historical earnings, and but it's on the roadmap, and the fact that you brought it up sort of emphasizes the importance of us adding that feature. I'll just give one tale that I've heard, which I'm sure you all have heard many more like this, but I ran into a woman through Code for America who is a low-income parent. Her child has a disability. She lives in Florida, and she has a pretty deep knowledge of the benefit system to the extent that she built a spreadsheet to do some of these computations depending on her earnings to figure out how her SSI and SNAP would all vary. And during one recertification period, she found that the numbers that she got from her SNAP office were below what she expected. So she actually asked them to see the code behind the computations, and they got back to, I guess, ask the contractor about that and said they could do it. It would cost them $3,000 that the SNAP recipient would have to pay. So I don't think that's a great way to run government. And so I think there's a huge, good case for having this case management software be proprietary, because those are companies that are providing a service, need to recoup those costs. But the rules themselves should not be behind any gates. Anyone should be able to see how SSA or a county or state government is computing the benefits that they are providing. And I think that's the kind of transparency that we generally expect, at least directionally, from the tax side, but it's often quite absent from the benefit side. So we hope we can sort of partner in the long term with organizations that are building that software, or potentially provide it ourselves, to just make all of that open source and transparent for everyone. Yeah, great point about rules changing so often. For example, the IRS just released new tax brackets last week. So and compare that to, sorry, I keep harping on this point with taxes versus benefits, but they were so transparent. There were tons of articles all across think tanks and news agencies sort of showing how all those numbers are going to change. Compare that to when SNAP numbers changed. I was pretty surprised. Hawaii actually had lower benefits this year than last year because of a change to their inflation adjustments. And pretty much nobody covered that. Almost nobody covered how SNAP parameters were changing even in the contiguous US. So we just think there's a huge opportunity to bring that information to people.
Yeah, especially in the context of natural disasters in Hawaii. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Dang. I know we're getting close to the end, and I really did want to circle back on the AI question. Max, so much has changed. Okay, so first of all, just the AI prompt to be able to ask it for a policy explanation is amazing. I wish I just had that in the past so I could just send it to my ledge team. But it seems like with the White House's recent executive order, all of the agency executive order follow on the AI stuff. AI is really going to have a huge impact on how benefits programs work. Again, coming back to that discretion point that you mentioned, seems like a lot of those decisions are going to be made with AI models going forward. How do you see this impacting PolicyEngine, benefits and taxation more generally? What's the next few years going to look like?
Yeah, that reminded me, let me just go back here because it was a little slow before, but this is how we're using AI today, where you can, again, after designing a policy reform, click a button and it's going to draft a white paper about how the policy is designed in plain language, and also in plain language what the impacts are going to be based on our computational models. I show this, it's kind of, some people are using it. It's more of a fun demonstration of how I think we could use AI in the future. Because really the idea of agents and AIs having access to, let's see, where'd my Zoom go? Oh, here it is. AIs having access to computational models like ours, I think could really enhance their utility. It's going to be quite a while before an AI could actually read the legal code, especially given all these complex interactions of programs, and tell you, okay, based on your characteristics, here is what you're eligible for, and sort of doing, here's where you're going to hit a cliff. Here's all the programs that are going to be affected when you hit that cliff. But if they can interact with models like ours, then they can just ask the question to the model, and you can then include that in kind of any different touch point. That could be from our website, from ChatGPT. It could be from the benefit agency itself, just having a little chat bot there to figure out and also identify and warn people maybe when policies are going to change. If you have an account on PolicyEngine or with your government, you could have it know how your situation is, what it might change, how it might change under different policy regimes and under different household scenarios. So I think, there's a lot of areas where we need to be careful to make sure that it's accurate and that it's not introducing bias where it didn't exist before. But there's such a huge opportunity to close some of the information gap on these programs. And we really believe in this no wrong door approach. We should be reaching people wherever they are. And in many cases, those natural language interfaces are going to be the easiest way for them to get that information.
Awesome. And I see we have one last question about veterans benefits. Is veteran status a variable in the dropdowns for right now?
It is. Yes, but we don't compute the benefits themselves because I think they do base similarly to Social Security on historical earnings. But we would definitely like to do that. And really appreciate the feedback here. We'll definitely prioritize those things that all of you mentioned.
Awesome. Max, thank you so much again for taking the time to join us. And everybody on the call, thank you so much for joining. I know it's a crazy week and a crazy time with the impending shutdown, so really appreciate your being here with us. And folks, also don't forget, we have 2 more webinars, Administrative Burden, coming up. We have How Do We Fix This, which will focus on the difference between implementation and policy with Jen Palka later this week. And then we have Understanding Administrative Burden with Don Moynihan. And special intro remarks from Rep. Kilmer, who we just found out is leaving the house. So that one's extra special coming up next week. So don't forget to go join us for those. As always, our casework resources are all casework.org or popbox.org/casework. And if you have any questions, suggestions, other thoughts on PolicyEngine, how this would be helpful, please feel free to send them my way and I will make sure that they get to Max. Awesome. Max, thank you again, everybody. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.